Hello, everybody, and welcome to the VIA Pioneer Speaker Series. My name is Ryan Nemec, and I'm the Education Director of the VIA Institute on Character, and I'm very pleased to continue on hosting this series, which is now in its third session. The first couple sessions, we had Dr. Robert Biswas-Diener and Dr. Tayyab Rashid give us their insights on working with VIA in an advanced way and working with VIA in the coaching and psychotherapy world. And this session, I'm very pleased to continue that theme or that track of working with the VIA with coaching and counseling. And also we have a bit of a business flavor, an executive coaching flavor to this session. And I'll introduce our special guest speaker in a moment. And I just wanted to let those of you that are new to this series know a little bit more about it, that what our intention here at VIA is to host speakers who are pioneers. So true to the name of this series, who are pioneers leading the charge in strength-based applications and research in their respective fields. And so this topic of VIA pioneers is perfect for Carol Kauffman, who I'll be introducing here. And so Carol has a wide background and a very impressive background in the worlds of coaching and psychotherapy and education, and also especially in the business world. And for over 25 years, Carol has taught at Harvard Medical School as an assistant clinical professor, and she's also the founding director of the Institute for Coaching, or Institute of Coaching. And that website, I want to just kind of immediately direct you to that to consider joining the Institute and for learning more about the work and the cutting-edge things that they're doing, and that's www.instituteofcoaching.org. And I'm going to have that up on one of the slides as we proceed here. Also, Carol is in charge as chair and co-founder of the Harvard Coaching Conference. And this is a spectacular event that happens annually that I would highly encourage you to consider attending. It's toward the end of the year in September or October of the year, and they always bring in prolific speakers from a wide variety of disciplines, and it's hailed by many individuals as the best conference they've ever attended. So I would encourage you to consider that. And Carol is a really true practitioner and true academic. As an academic, she's the founding editor-in-chief of peer-reviewed coaching journal, the very first one, actually. It's one that I sometimes read as well, called Coaching, an International Journal of Theory, Research, and Practice. She also directed and authored Harvard Business Review's first research project on executive coaching. In the practitioner world, she's consulted to numerous organizations around the world, doing executive coaching and executive training and leadership training and supervision, high performance coach for leaders, and on and on. So it's a pleasure to have Carol here on the call with us to be able to provide us with the latest thinking in terms of using VIA character strengths in the executive coaching world and in helping high performers. And so before I turn it over to Carol, just to let you know of the flow for today. So Carol will introduce many different concepts and ideas and examples from her work. And then we're going to actually hear from a couple of you presenting cases or challenges that you're facing in your work. And Carol is going to have a live sort of case discussion with you. And then, meanwhile, we'll also field questions from all of you who actually posed questions before this call and those of you that posed questions during this call. And so that's our plan. So feel free to email me at ryan@viacharacter.org if you have a particular question for Carol. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Carol. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you. I'm tired just listening to all the things I do. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. One thing I wanted to let you know is Ryan gave you the instituteofcoaching.org URL. But what I wanted to offer you, for those of you listening later in time, write info@instituteofcoaching.org to get this. But for all of you, I'd like to give you a passcode so that you can go in and look at the membership site, because we have the Institute of Coaching and the Institute of Coaching Professional Organization, which gives you access to all of our materials, including journal subscriptions and some other things. So if you go to instituteofcoaching.org and you see the ICPA or member login on the top right, if you push that and write in New Year, just one word, New Year, well, two words together, New Year, all lowercase letters, you will have access to the entire site for the month of January. If someone's listening to it and it's not January, write us, put VIA and character, and we'll get you free access for a month to check it out. So, Brian, is it possible to tell me anything about who's on the call in terms of particular interests, or should I just dive right in?
I think diving in would be best. The main thing to know is that the majority of people here are practitioners, and we always define that loosely in terms of these would be people in the business world, so executives and managers and executive coaches. And then also there'll be a fair number of counselors and life coaches, other types of coaches, health coaches, and then a handful of people in the education world as well, professors at different universities and colleges.
That's a great group. Let me just give you a quick overview of the content of what I'll talk about. And what you can do is, if there's a break for questions, we can do that, or you can email Ryan the questions as I go. What I'll do first of all is I'll talk a little bit about how I use the VIA in executive coaching. I also use it in supervision and leadership training. First, I'll go over basic self-assessment. And what you can also do is, if I'm saying stuff that's too basic, write Ryan, I'll move along. But I'll talk a little bit about being a strengths connoisseur, sharpening some of the strengths, how I kind of do the first run of working with the VIA. Then I'll talk a little bit about how do you translate the VIA into a business language, business setting. And I have sort of written my own VIA A to Z, where I go through each strength and think about what does that look like in a high-performance leadership situation. Because as I got on one of the questions, it's like, how do we translate this? Because people can think that the VIA is in a soft language, but it has a lot of backbone and bite, and how we can kind of capture that. So that's all part of basic assessment. Then I'll do a little bit of review, a little bit of how I use VIA with the GROW model, and if people don't know that, I'll describe it. I can then talk a little bit about how you can use VIA to brand yourself, whether you're sort of going for a job interview or you're a coach and you're working on marketing yourself. Then I can just sort of share a few stories of using the VIA in some specific ways with people. And so what you all can do now is through Ryan feedback if there's something in particular you want me to focus on. So let me just share a little bit about how I use it. You know, basic self-assessment. That's where I typically have someone take the VIA. I never do just the 5 strengths. I have them make sure they look at the all 24. Then, you know, I do the typical thing where I ask people, how does the strength feel for them? What kind of stories might they have? And what we're looking for, one way I think about it is in what does the VIA do? I find that it's just a powerful springboard for new conversations, and I use it and weave it into the coaching a lot, not just as an assessment and then forget about it. Because what we know is, you know, for our brains, you know, things that are negative are like, you know, Velcro to our brain, it all sticks. And things that are positive are like Teflon and slide right off. And it turns out that's particularly true with our language. There's a journalism professor from Columbia who said, if you want to pen a book or a movie effectively, you have to be a very good writer. But if you want to praise a movie or a book effectively, you have to be a superb writer. And the reason is we have all this language for failing, for betrayals, for negative things, and a much less precise language for strengths. And I think that's one of the kind of fabulous things about the VIA is it gives us a language of strengths that can be spiky and can be clear. So first off is how do you, help the person become a strengths connoisseur? And again, it's not as easy as it sounds. I think of it as similar to like wine tasting. First time I tasted wine, someone said, well, I was at a wine tasting, and they said, what does it smell like? And I said, wine. And then they said, no, really, Kauffman, what does it smell like? White wine. And then my friend said, no, can't you spell the apple, smoky, oaky, grassy, etc.? And I could. And I see the VIA like that, that how do you really, really take in what the strengths are? And I often find that I've read through, that handbook and sort of created a list of what the strengths really looked like. So, for example, I had one CEO of a small company, and her top strengths were prudence and perseverance. And she's like, oh, great, prudence. Isn't that just perfect? Now, if you really think about what is prudence, it comes from the word prudentia, which means far-sighted. And prudentia and prudence really means the capacity to see things far into the future and to be able to align your actions with that future. And so then I said to her, so now in running your company, how does prudence sound to you now? So like this woman, many of us just don't appreciate what our strengths are. And we really need to think about how do they surface in these sort of high-stakes situations, and how can we help people sharpen their appreciation of what their strengths are. Another one, working with a woman, I saw her today, who's the head of asset allocation at a multinational bank, and one of her top strengths is prudence. I say this because this is sort of one of the strengths people don't love. Well, what she does is, she runs, billions and billions of dollars, and if she didn't have the capacity to see if something in their product portfolio was not going to make it in the long term, you'd really want to have prudence as the top strength. So I try to have people look at their work, look at their strengths, and see how to match that up. So I can give you an example for sort of what do some of the strengths look like in high performance situations. So here's one, and I particularly picked some soft ones because critical thinking, all that, that's kind of very clear how that could be edgy. But, it's a little harder to be edgy about something like gratitude. So here's some of my thinking about how gratitude surfaces in a high performance, high stakes environment. So the simple definition we hear is that you're aware of good things that happen to you. You don't take them for granted. Your friends and family know you are grateful because you take time to express your thanks. So at first blush, you can say, okay, how is that going to play in the boardroom? So I went through and thought about how I have seen gratitude surface in the boardroom. So, and it might be interesting if some of you want to comment to Ryan to see if this resonates with what you have seen. So what I wrote out for myself is gratitude. These high performers see adversities as valuable lessons, and they use these challenges to hone their skills and character in their leadership. They also see this in others. This attitude can unleash other strengths. Truly grateful individuals, are really aware of how they've been helped through the efforts of others. So a lot of the people that I work with, gratitude is like a real ego leveler. It really helps you not get a big head. But as a result, they can be ego-free despite being enormously successful. And what does that do? That inspires followership, engagement, connectivity in the organization, which is connected to profitability, customer satisfaction, and good performance reviews. So the other part is that gratitude does not imply a lack of awareness of your own contribution. But grateful individuals, I find, can also appreciate a more complete picture. You know, if you're grateful, if you have gratitude, it means you get cause and effect. And it says also that gratitude in high performance is an awareness of the complex systems of cause and effect that facilitate your own success and other people's success. So another way is, I think I see gratitude as sort of a stealth assertiveness skill, which is going to sound like a disconnect when you first think of it, gratitude and assertiveness. But think about using gratitude on behalf of others. For example, high achievers with this strength know how they and other people should be treated. And then when there's a disconnect, they're able to point that out. So that's kind of one example of one strength and how you can use any one of these strengths and really think through, what does this look like in a CEO? What does this look like in, you know, your brand development people, or in your supply chain people, or your professors? So what we can do later when we get to some question and answers, I can do that with more strengths, but really thinking through how gratitude, appreciation of beauty and excellence, and some of these strengths really, really can pop. So that's sort of the first part, just in terms of the basic assessment process. And Ryan, I'm wondering if we should pause for a second if anyone has questions, or if you've gotten any email before I move into the next section.
I think we're good to keep moving forward at this point. Thank you. A really wonderful example. I think that's exactly the type of thing that people want to hear, because that is a common question we get, is that sometimes people say, well, gosh, the VIA language is just so soft, it doesn't translate into the business world, or I have a manager that just cares about the bottom line, and it, you know, and so with the way that you just translated that perfectly explains how one of the strengths that's probably seen as one of the most soft strengths, how it really plays out very nicely in the business world. And I'd probably speak for other people. You know, any other examples you want to give? I don't want to mess up your flow right now, but any other examples?
Oh,
like,
I can do all. I can do all 24.
Maybe one more. Either one we
Sure.
get asked about is often is love or appreciation of beauty and excellence. Either one of those would be people I think would like to hear as well.
Okay, I'll do appreciation of beauty and excellence, because that connects to one of my CEO stories later. And maybe what I'll do is, instead of talking about the CEO story later, I'll do this one, and then I'll tell that story.
Great.
So, sure, appreciation of beauty and excellence. So here's the, you know, the simple definition. You know, you notice and appreciate beauty and excellence and/or skilled performance in all domains of life, from nature to art to math to science to everyday experience. Okay, that's explanation A. Here's another one. This strength involves the capacity to appreciate what excellence should look like, and therefore what is not, what does it not look like? So in other words, this is what excellence should look like, and you can see the disconnect before you in evaluating someone's performance or how a team is doing. It really gives you that clear vision of, this is what it should look like, therefore this is what is wrong, and you can identify what is lacking. But it also leads to like a commitment to do what would be needed to create an ideal product, for example. You have the appreciation of beauty and excellence. You say, well, you know what? Half of this is good, but half of it is not. So it's not just a passive. You know, I think when you think appreciation of beauty and excellence, you think of, you know, watching a sunrise or a sunset, as opposed to, this is a very active strength that you can use to assess what is around you. And it's not, you know, limited, obviously, to any domain. But what I find is that individuals with this have a strong drive towards perfection, and that energizes them. You know, they try to, you know, achieve excellence in professional domains and personal domains. And when they do, they feel satisfied and fulfilled. And when they, people with appreciation of beauty and excellence are faced with a challenge, you know, they want to create excellence. So for them, in developing other people, it's like, I want my people to be beautiful and excellent in their performance, not just looking at the ballet people, but your own people and your own team. How can you help everyone sort of step up to the bar? And The other sort of nice high-performance stress release is that, if you really love beauty and excellence, the other thing is it gives people a really quick reservoir of positive emotion and calming emotion through their capacity to soak in beauty. And they find it inspiring or calming, which then replenishes their energy and then can facilitate back to higher levels of performance. Because I see this very, very close connection between, positive emotion and performance. So let me tell you the story of one of my clients and her company. So the woman I worked with for a while, and she seems like sort of like the most wonderful, enthusiastic leader. And in a session with me, she said something which stunned me. And she said, I'm thinking of selling my company. And it was a services-related company, and sort of training people, and then they deliver a service. And I said, why? And she goes, I'm bored. I'm just not excited about it. And I have to say, I was really taken aback and stunned. And I had been talking with her about the VIA, and she said, I was still taking in being stunned, and she said, well, let's use that instrument and see. Let's use that VIA and see what I can do about this. And I'm like, God bless you, and keep talking, because I'm intimidated by how am I going to, help someone not be bored who's ready to quit and sell their company. So her top strength was social intelligence. And she said, well, social intelligence, I don't really need, that's really not going to help me. I use that every day, all the time. I couldn't possibly use it better than I am now, so nothing there. Next, okay, appreciation of beauty and excellence. Well, I have my country home and my gardens for that, so I don't really need to work on. And she stopped, and she said, wait a minute. It's beauty and excellence. And I'm thinking to myself, yes. And fortunately, I just shut up and let her work. And she said, that's it. And I'm thinking, what's it? She goes, that's it. She goes, my company isn't excellent, and I don't love it. And that's why I want to sell it. So I just have to make my company excellent. She said, and I said, the obvious question. So how do you feel you could make your company excellent? She said, my training materials are old, and they're based on the previous owner and the previous CEO's work. It's not really mine. I'm going to just redo it all. I'm going to develop new trainings, new material. Okay, that's it. First of all, I was like, I'm sitting there with my mouth hanging open that she has introduced a major problem I didn't know she had and then fixed it in about not much longer than it took me to tell you, maybe 5-10 minutes. And that conversation was about 3 years ago. And what she did, she developed a plan. And because of this beauty and excellence, she really works very, very hard. And she redid all of their training materials, introduced new programs, and fell back in love with her company. And she still wants to sell her company, but she wants to wait 10 years and then get millions and millions and millions of dollars for it. So that was how she actually coached herself using the VIA, and how I learned that appreciation of beauty and excellence, we should emphasize the excellence even more than the beauty when working with people, particularly in the corporate world. So, okay, Ryan, I can go on to what I do next, unless there's a question that someone has or a comment you'd like to make.
I think that's great. Let's keep going. Doing great.
Okay. I can do this for 5 days, so hang on to that. Okay. So the first thing I do when I use the VIA is just this. This is all in the category of basic assessment. What are their strengths? How do they understand what their strengths are? Tell strength stories. Be able to value their strengths. Be able to anchor what they do to their strengths. Be able to understand strengths from a high-performance perspective. So that's all just kind of taking in, sort of higher orders of definition of what your strengths are and learning to use them and all that. Then I just do kind of a review of the strengths. you know, we all know like the sort of the different 6 categories. What some of the research in leadership development talks about that if you that you want to be a really great leader, you need to be able to operate from 5 different strengths in your work. You know, whether it's, and this can map to the VIA or not, but you know, if it's like prudence is very often connected to strategic thinking. So whether it's really good in strategy, whether you're good in execution, whether you're good with people, but that you really need to have a wide variety of strengths in order to make it to national and world-class kind of leadership. So what I try to look at is, again, basically what is the configuration of strengths, you know, up there in the top 7 or so. Just, you know, are they all strengths, you know, cognitive ones? Is the person sort of a little too heavy in transcendent ones? You know, kind of what does the breadth look like? And are there expensive omissions? I think I worked with a VP of HR once, and the highest humanities strength was like number 10. And this was really, I mean, she and I actually did some work around developing those strengths more because it was an omission. But the other one that I like is something that I call the strength limbo, which is how low on the list can you go before it feels like that's not a strength you can use. So some people, when you go through their 24 strengths, I will just ask them, not exactly on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think you embody this strength, but basically something like that. So, you know, you sort of look at the top 5, and most people say, yes, those are all me. And then we keep going down to see how low can they go where they still feel like that is a fully developed strength in theirs. And then, you know, so when some people will go down to 5, and then number 6 is, okay, now the 6th one here is love of learning, and actually I feel that I need to develop in that area. It's not, doesn't feel really quite developed. Other people go down to like 13 and 14. So I sort of think about it, it's like how low can you go down that list before you feel this is like a full strength, or this is like a part strength, versus this is an area of development for me. And I just sort of find that's helpful, again, because I like to really help people think about what are ways they can use a diverse set of strengths when they're facing a challenge. And with that, I think, you know, I mix metaphors wildly here, but this one is like you want to have a bunch of arrows in your quiver. You know, so I've got a particular challenge ahead of me. Can I use my curiosity for this? You know, is that an arrow I can pull out and use? You know, how can I use my prudence, strategic thinking? How can I use my authenticity? How could I use my humor? You know, what are the arrows, you know, the arrows in my quiver? How full is my quiver for things, strengths that I can deploy? And so when I do the review process, I try to, again, look at the configuration, look at the, you know, how low can you go in terms of the variety of strengths, and then how many you could really pull out and use. And then there was a very lovely article Chris Peterson wrote in Mike Csikszentmihalyi's book. The name I forget completely, but the article that Chris wrote also talked about contortion of strengths, like the whole idea of, you know, if you only have 2 arrows in your quiver, 2 strengths you can use them over and over and over. And you know, you want, for example, with someone with appreciation of beauty and excellence, if that's all you got and it wasn't tempered by capacity to love and be loved, this may not be such a wonderful leader. You really want, you know, appreciation of beauty and excellence to be matched with something. So how do we all kind of make sure that we, or the people we're working with, have a repertoire and aren't overusing one? So now, I will now explain a very simple coaching model I use. I've sort of hinted at it with the quiver idea already, but I'm going to change metaphors. I don't know how many of you know the GROW model, so for those that don't, I'll describe it, and those that do, you can take a snooze break or answer some email. The GROW model, it was made popular by Sir John Whitmore, and it was, it's very simple what it stands for. It's sort of a model of coaching, and you ask questions in this model. So GROW is what are your goals, what's the reality, what are your options, and what is the way forward. So in a conversation around something, you would start out with the questions around what is the goal? If you really, what's the best outcome here? This isn't just like a tangible goal. It's really what's your vision. You know, if everything went well, what would this really look like for you? Then R is the reality. Okay, what are the circumstances? What's going on? What are the obstacles? Then the O is what are the options? You know, what are your options of how you can move forward? And then that's sort of the brainstorming time. And then you narrow it down into, okay, what is the way forward that you want? You know, what can you do over the next, say, 6 weeks to raise yourself half a point in the area that you want to improve? So what I do is, now we go back to the O. I think of the O as, you know, these options. So the image I have in mind is, imagine you're about to cross a bridge. So there you are moving forward, and there's this big ravine, which is the gap between where you are now and where you want to go. And there's a bridge over ravine. And for some reason I have the you know, sort of a big O, your options. What I try to do is to think about what are 5 different bridges over that gap based on your top 5 strengths. So it's like, let's say for me, one of the things I really don't love to do is give people like negative feedback or in a conflict situation. So it's like, okay, I have to talk to this person that's working for me. I have to give them, you know, bad feedback that, well, it's effective feedback but if you don't like to say that kind of thing, it feels bad. Like, I've got to give them feedback. So the first question is, well, how could I use one of my strengths to do that? So for me, perhaps some of you guessed that one of my top strengths is love of learning and teaching. So instead of thinking about, so if I go to social intelligence, oh, how could I do this effectively? I don't know. Social intelligence is way low for me. So that doesn't create a solution. But if we work with someone and go to one of their top strengths are, chances are if we say, how could you use your love of learning and teaching in a new way to help you with this bad feedback that you have to give somewhere, this feedback about that you don't want to give. So you can see what I did is once I thought of it as a teaching situation rather than the awkward situation of where I had more power, no matter what I said, the person had to do it, but then the fear that as a result of that, they're going to lose engagement, it's like, no, I can just let that paradigm go. I can just think about what about what I have to say is actually useful to this person in the present and in their career, and how can I frame this as a teaching opportunity. So that's kind of one example, and I've used that with people a lot. And what happens is, because it's based on their strengths and not my strengths, something will often pop. And in that way, I think that using the VIA and the strengths really increases our capacity for empathy, because empathy is about the other person's story and not your story. So if you can really use their strengths as your guide, it helps you ask questions that are really attuned to who they are, and therefore more likely to hit a place of creativity for them. So I'll do the same thing now, Brian. I can pause and see if there's questions, and then I could do a quick example of branding and succession planning with strengths as the next 2 things I could talk about.
Sounds great. Yeah, let's do one question and then go to the branding, and then let's go to one of the individuals live. So here's one question, noting I work with a boss who seems to only be concerned with the bottom line. What should I say to him to help him see the benefit of VIA strengths and strengths-based approaches, because he's very resistant at this point?
And this is a boss?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I would tell them that positivity leads to performance and profit, so that it's not a problem. That they're only interested in profit. That's not a bad thing if you are, that's your job. So the point is, oh, by the way, I would have them look at this month's Harvard Business Review, which is on, I don't know if you've seen it. It's on positivity and how positive emotion leads to performance and work engagement. So that problem is now a lot easier now that positivity and happiness has made the special issue of the Harvard Business Review. But with that, I would say there's a lot of research out there that connects people feeling good and using their strengths with peak performance, and peak performance will lead to profitability. So it sort of seems like how to help them make that link. I also think that when it's a boss, the other thing is to have them see you in action and use your strengths in action, and say to them, and somehow kind of slide that into the conversation rather than trying to set up a scenario where you're convince them. Because I think this stuff, it's like a virus, it really does connect with you, but it's hard to convince people. And with this one, I would just go with the bottom line that this person values, and if they like profit, to tell them about the Losada work and some of the other work where basically the equivalent of using your strengths leads to profitability.
That's wonderful. I like that because there's many different levels to that. So one of those levels is likely going to reach that many more employers, whether that be the level of, hey, check out this issue of the Harvard Business Review, or whether it's, let me give you some facts and data on positivity and strength-based use and how it connects to greater worker engagement and happiness at work and therefore greater productivity, or whether it's kind of more personal and the person sharing a story of their own strengths with the boss. Or I don't know, would you ever also have the employee do, if it was an appropriate situation, something where they would try to strength spot in the boss to kind of point out how the boss has used strengths to their success? I mean, have you ever found that to be useful?
Oh, yeah, I think that's actually it's a great idea. I mean, again, if the person is really resistant, just stop. But to say, for example, or one time if the boss is feeling stressed about something they have to do, to say, I remember when you did such and such last week, and I saw incredible creativity and perseverance in you in that setting. And I was wondering, can I help be a thought partner right now to help you do that? Or if they, you can sort of name it. But again, it depends if the boss is really resistant or just needs some kind of slow education.
Exactly. Great point. Well, great. Thanks, Grace. So maybe a few more minutes on those other topics, and then we'll move to a couple live cases.
Yeah, that'd be great. Now, this is something, Ryan, that I did with you when we were back at IPA, and you asked me to do an interview with you.
Yes.
And one of the examples, I don't know how many people here, if they've been in your course, have seen this video, which of me, actually. But this is an example for those of you who might be coaching or teaching and having some way of wanting to brand yourself with your strengths. So this came out of a supervision session, because a lot of what I do is supervise executive coaches. And I had one client, a terrific coach, who hates marketing herself, and we were just trying to think, how could she describe what she does? So, she was thinking about how to use her strengths to help her have the conversation. And I said, well, why don't we just have the conversation around your strengths? So what she did, in terms of what is her unique value proposition as a coach, and we used some of her strengths, like some of her strengths were curiosity, creativity, capacity to love and be loved, and authenticity. And so we worked out a situation where she would, someone would say, well, what kind of coach are you? And she would say, well, one of my strengths is I'm very curious, so I'm going to enjoy asking you a lot of questions for us to unpack what's going on in your world and the challenges that you face. And another strength of mine is creativity, which means I love to do things in new ways and discover novel solutions. So one of the other things you might get in coaching with me is we'll just work on a lot of ways where, we'll explore different options of what you're doing and see what kind of new approaches we can develop. But the other part is that I have a real, now, the person may or may not name the strength capacity to love and be loved, but a real joy in connecting to people. So what will happen in coaching with me is, we'll develop a strong working relationship, which will create a really powerful container for you to learn what you need to learn about yourself, discover what new things you can do, and to help you be at your best. But the other thing I bring to the table is authenticity, which is, on one hand, I'll be, curious, we'll be creative, and have a good relationship, but, you'll be able to count on me to tell you the truth and to really explore some of the difficult things as well as what your strengths are. So what this person can then just do is really describe what do they bring to the table as a coach, and to think through, again, their strengths and how that surfaces in a more high-performance way in a coaching session, or you can imagine, or teaching, et cetera. So that's another way that I have used this with people. And so I guess the last piece I can talk about is the other thing I do a lot. Right now I'm doing a leadership development rollout at a multinational company, and we've now finished the top 100. Now we're about 250 people into the second group of 500. And one of the main things we're doing is helping people identify their strengths and their sweet spots, which is where sweet spot is where your intrinsic and extrinsic motivation matches up with your capabilities and your strengths, and creates basically the sweet spot where you don't have to work as hard to have very powerful output. And why I mention that now is one thing that I've discovered. I've been working with the head of European and Asian HR on this, is we're looking at how to use strengths and sweet spots in succession planning. Because I don't know about for the rest of you, but what I find is with a lot of people that I work with is they, when they're successful, they get given more and more things. And so their actual job responsibilities go up 20 to 30% every year, which means if you want to stay sentient, you have to divest yourself of 20 to 30% of what you do every year to stay the same, as opposed to become completely swamped. So what they're now going to do at HR in this company is every single person, when they do their performance reviews of the people that work for them, is identify and know what the person's strengths and sweet spots are, and then delegate jobs to them accordingly. So for my head of Europe HR, she's looking at all the things that she does. As she goes through the week, she's doing little checks next to things that are in her, as I say, sour spot, things that she finds draining, and then she matches those tasks up with what the strengths are the people working for her. And basically, she was like, you mean other people actually wanted to budget? And there's other people where budgeting completely floats their boat. Or the reverse, as an introvert, you don't love all these like going out to the external world and interfacing with all the other CHROs in the world. Somebody else loves to do that. So how to kind of use the strengths and the awareness of your sweet spot in planning, succession planning. And then for me, I use it in my partnerships because I have a problem with chronic enthusiasm. And one of the downsides of a lot of positive emotion is at times you are not a clear thinker, which is why you don't want to feel so fabulous when you're budgeting. As a matter of fact, a HBR article in 2005 talked about how 75% of small business failures are due to over-optimism rather than under-optimism. So for those of us who are overly optimistic, we have to make sure we partner with people who can pop our bubble. So for me, whenever I write anything, I always go for someone where sort of open-mindedness and critical thinking is their top strength. Because when I have an idea, I need someone to pop my bubble about 5 times before I get a really good idea, or before I haven't come up with something that's essentially going to exhaust every member of the Institute and leave them weeping, where I have to really know who to listen to and who to partner with in order to lead effectively.
It's interesting that you say that, Carol, that example there of looking to somebody really high in judgment and critical thinking and that character strength, because I actually do the exact same strategy that you do there, is where if I'm doing a new writing project or a new presentation or a new thing that I think is a wonderful idea, I run it by actually Neil Mayerson, who you know.
Oh yeah, Neil. He can put on his cranky pants when you.
Well, and just because I really see him as a paragon, for me at least, in terms of that judgment strength, and I know that he will find limitations and challenges to it. So it helps me to kind of be able to see the wider picture. Since judgment for me is kind of more my middle strength. So I work on it and try to improve it, but it's still going to be a gap.
Right. And then also, Neil needs people like you and me around as he's like shooting down, his own idea to say, no, this is really going to work. So it's really both ways.
Right. Other strengths would balance it out and contribute. Yes. Well, this is great. Let's okay, if we move to a couple different sort of case discussions.
Yeah, hope I have something useful to say.
Okay, great. So what I'll do is I'll open up the line to one person who's volunteered. Her name is Kay Bruce, and Kay is in France, I believe. Kay, you're on the line. Are you calling from France right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for being on the call, Kay, and I just wanted to remind you and assure that it's okay with you that we are recording this session. Is that still okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay, great. And also just one other thing to say is that please keep anything, any kind of personal kind of case that you might be describing to Carol, to kind of disguise the case or keep,
Sure.
in order to ensure confidentiality and whatnot. And so, okay, so I'll pass it on to you now, Carol, and the two of you can kind of discuss case, kind of situation or case here.
Okay. Hi, Carol. Hi, Carol. Good to hear you, and it's been very interesting listening to you. And I think I've got part of my answer from what you've already said. So let me go with my issue. Yes.
No, that's great. I'd be glad to just sit back and watch you describe the issue and answer it.
So my issue is this. I'm an executive trainer, and I'm working with a large company working on a group corporate training program, and I've started using the VIA reports and the VIA questionnaires with my groups. And one of the reasons I'm using it is because it helps create group dynamic very quickly among people who don't necessarily know each other at the outset. So I find it a very effective tool to do that, so that people can share and...
Yeah. I want to stop you for a second because for the people listening, I'd like you to, that's a really great takeaway right there.
Okay.
Is how you're using this and creating, we'll get to whatever your challenge is, but that sounds really, that's an important thing for people to hear.
Yeah, I think it kind of almost gets people onto what I'd like to call a kind of fast track in terms of interpersonal communication. It gets people onto that kind of fast track, very quickly. You can jump a lot of, let's say, the normal social hurdles that people go to when they don't know each other, because we can just cue straight in onto strengths. So I found it very effective in terms of creating group dynamic. Now my issue is, it's much more to do with the, let's say, the corporate environment, and the corporate environment is one where really you're not supposed to, let's say there's a kind of cultural bias somehow, you're not supposed to require people to bring to, let's say, a more of a public forum what is essentially personal. So in other words, how can I require people to share their strengths, to put it crudely? That's it. So it's more, managing this kind of interface. I mean, the training, let's say, provides a safe space for the participants, but it's outside that. It's more the environment of the company and the company requiring people to, excuse me, share what is personal. And, excuse me, listening to you, Carol, part of the answer that I thought I might have here was when you were talking about using strengths can increase empathy because you're working on other people's stories. So I thought, okay, so what are my clients, my corporate clients' stories? And I wanted to match it because they have clearly identified their corporate values. And one of the corporate values is group spirit. So I thought, part of the answer must be making a match with that corporate value.
Yeah, that's great.
So that they could identify, okay, what are we doing here, group spirit? Okay, well, group spirit, it's safe to ask people to share what is personal. So that's my issue, Carol.
And how overt, I mean, have they actually said this, is this something you are intuitively picking up, or have people said to you, Kay, you can't do this, it's too personal?
It's more, I'm working in a culture, corporate and national culture, where it's, the direct communication is more indirect, so there's no direct, Kay, you cannot do this, but it's more like, oh, we have to be, you can get the touchy-feely thing, you have to be careful, you're treading on what is personal, and therefore that's private. And because it's personal and therefore private, how can you bring it into the public domain, in the corporate domain then becomes public?
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind about that is we can also tell them is like, well, I'm actually talking about strengths at work.
Yes.
So
yes.
People can have these very personal strengths at home, but we're talking about strengths that we need at work. And what we know about leadership, for example, is, higher up in leadership challenges, peer relationships become really key to advancement and for an organization to have connectivity and profitability. So I would just go with absolutely. I mean, I would just agree even stronger and say absolutely. Things that are truly private that should not be talked about here. We are interested in how these strengths can serve the peer relationships, managing up and managing down. And just pop it right back into the corporate challenges that they do face.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that useful?
It is. It is. Thank you, Carol, for that.
So.
All right.
I remember working with someone who actually said that in French there wasn't actually a word for flow either, that this whole thing of how you literally translate.
Yes, yeah. Translation, literal translation word to word is not so easy, and cultural translation, for example, people react very strongly when they see the word religion in the VIA. Yeah, because that's completely private.
Yes, and very often what I do, because there are some things in the VIA that are very clunky culturally, and so what I do is I just profusely apologize about it in advance. I remember working with a German-based consulting company once, and they were just like, we hate that test. And so I understand it can feel very American, but take it anyway and emphasize the heck out of it. But let's find, if we could find a language for you that will help you identify your strengths, that will help your work engagement and your performance. And who cares about that stuff? Let's try and get past it.
Yeah, and find other references that speak to them.
Well, that's great. Let me just jump in here for a second, and I just want to say thanks again, Kay, for sharing, and a wonderful response. Yep, you're very welcome, and wonderful response from you, Carol, and I think that's great food for thought for all of us. And I'm just going to mute you now, Kate. Thanks again, and
thanks.
And before our next caller, Carol, on that topic of religion, could you say a little bit about that? About, since one of the character strengths, which VIA calls spirituality, does have religiousness as a component to it, and some of the questions deal with faith, some deal with purpose, some deal with meaning, some deal with having a calling. So clearly, there's parts of that strength that aren't just explicitly practicing religion, but nevertheless, just that whole constellation there of spirituality. How do you address that in the workplace setting? That would be sort of another one of those that sometimes people say is sort of a soft strength, or there's no place for that here. How do you deal with sort of resistance in that way, and how do you kind of frame that?
Well, there's a couple things. One is that I find that a lot of people who are what we would think of as very spiritual, their quote-unquote spirituality rating is very low, because it does seem that it's more about, this is one of the items that seems extraordinarily American to me. And so I think what happens is that pulls for it. So I just sort of name that and just say, you know, for that part, this one is a little culturally challenged. But in terms of the general idea of what we call spirituality in the workplace, you know, some of the work that I was doing with this gigantic company is what we do is our work is that we help leaders find what their purpose in life is, and then what they do is they align their jobs and their careers to their purpose in life. And that there is enormous power in having real crystal clarity on what your personal mission and purpose is. And again, it's translated into, in this particular case, a real uptick in engagement scores. Some of the engagement scores in this company have gone up in some places 35% in 1 year, based on people really finding what truly matters to them, and then finding how does that match to their current job or not. So in terms of the spirituality part, that does connect to your sense of calling, your sense of purpose. There's enormous bottom line connections to that, because you can really tap into your full motivation.
It makes a lot of sense. Okay, thank you for that response. Now I'm gonna now move to Angus Skinner.
Oh, and but by the way, some of the data for that, if people are interested, there's a lot of articles about this in Leadership Quarterly on authentic leadership. And when people talk about, this is where language is strange, authentic leadership, that's very much about that is identifying what your core purpose is and aligning your job around it.
So look for authentic leadership in what journal was it? Leadership Quarterly?
Leadership Quarterly has a lot of great articles by Bruce Avolio, Fred Luthens, and other people on authenticity in the workplace.
Okay. Great.
Okay,
thank you.
on.
Okay, and now I'm opening up the line to Angus Skinner. And Angus, are you with us there from Scotland? Angus, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here from Scotland.
Yes. Hi.
I'm here.
Yep, you're coming in good. Okay, and just a quick reminder that we are recording you, and to make sure that's okay with you.
That's fine with me.
Okay, great. And again, just another reminder, just to again keep things confidential in terms of disguising any identifying information of any case you might present. And so I'm opening it now to you and Carol.
Hello.
Hello, Carol. That was a fascinating tour of all sorts of things, really.
Yeah, sort of a canter through many ideas.
Well, yeah. Possibly a romp. That would be good. But tell me. You know, my field is social care, so my interest is very much in people's engagement with care in their lives, not just at work. But I'm very interested in something you said about over-optimistic, and is there a danger that at times we're just over-optimistic? Quite a lot of positive psychology is based on the Russian research, which suggested that we are negatively biased, whereas most of the current neuroscience kind of suggests that we are probably over-optimistic. And I think in terms of just dealing with issues of care, the fact that we have disability, aging, and death, then these are important questions. So,
could you talk just a tiny bit louder? I'm having a bit of trouble
sorry,
hearing.
sorry. All right. I can certainly talk louder.
Ah, now I can hear you.
Is that better? Is that better across the way? So, I mean, I mean, if we have to, if we accept that we have to deal with our brains one way or another, do we deal with them with an expectation they're over-optimistic in their biases, or that they're negatively biased? Does that matter? And for me, of course, does that matter when it comes to questions of how people care? Because I suppose where I'm coming from, Carol, is I think compassion is the most important aspect of how care is delivered in the US or across the world. So how do we manage, lead, and support compassion in families, between staff and carers and others? I think that compassion is what people want, is what people thrive from.
Okay, so I'm not sure exactly what the question is for me, but one thing that comes to my mind, and maybe this is a little bit from the question you had mailed in, also is about I think that compassion is exactly one of the most important aspects of how care is delivered, and is important certainly in psychotherapy outcome studies. What they find over and over again is that what clients say is that the quality of the relationship was what was key to the recovery.
Yeah.
That it's not the techniques, etc. And so one thing behind your question is also, how do you help people then with compassion fatigue?
Yeah.
And in that way, I think the VIA is very helpful that way, because what it can help guide you to is how to be kind of crafting your work in alignment with your strengths so you feel refueled. You know, and in that way I think we can keep our energy alive, as well as stepping outside of the VIA in particular, using some of the work of Csikszentmihalyi and flow about having a balance of your challenges and your strengths. And what I would say also is a real connection to your purpose can also kind of keep your energy alive when you are, you know, as you said, you know, working with disability, aging, and death. These are very powerful things, and they're painful, and as well as transcendent. So I would say in that group, you know, it might be, how do you really build on and develop your transcendent strengths, you know, of, you know, sort of hope and also spirituality and humor.
So, I mean, you talked at one point earlier on about the importance of finding a sweet spot for people's strengths.
Yes, where your capabilities and your strengths overlap.
Yeah.
For example, you would not want to hear me play the violin, no matter how happy I might be to do so.
I'm sure you would be delighted to do so nonetheless, and you would feel in flow at the moment that you did it.
Yeah, right.
You know, which would be great. So there is that point, and I just wonder whether, I mean, my experience, I suppose, is that compassion comes through in that sweet spot. And somehow our systems, our government systems, our organizational systems, and our academic, limited as it is, research, almost prohibits bits of that sweet spot experience.
And I'm just going to jump in real quick again. I know we're kind of right at the little bit over in terms of time, but I want to, Carol, if there's final comments you want to maybe make to Angus and Angus, I would just, before that, I want to just thank you again for sharing and dialoguing with Carol. I'm sorry that we do have to kind of cut it off at this point, so that because we're past the hour a little bit here. But so I'm going to mute you. Thanks again, Angus, and I'm turning it back to you, Carol. Any kind of final comments to Angus's comments and questions?
Well, yeah, I mean, when he mentioned the whole idea of government and, big business and bureaucracy, there is a way that these large systems organizations are sometimes such a challenge to navigate. And here it would be just that. It's like, how can I go back to what my core strengths are to help me navigate that system, to remain curious when things seem closed, and also how to create a stealth culture of care, even if the larger organization, like where does compassion and academic tenure overlap, right? But what are ways to kind of work through the system? But I guess my last point is I hope this has been helpful for everyone, and that you can really see that I think that the VIA is both, it's got great wings and roots. I think it's very inspirational. It also is based on good data, and that it's also connected to very edgy stuff. Like when I give talks, I often give talks called authenticity, positivity, and edge. But I think that the VIA and getting the your understanding of these strengths down can give you an edge, and can also, again, be connected to bottom line kinds of things that corporations are interested in, as well as ourselves, as we think about our own development and our own performance.
Excellent. That's a wonderful way to conclude, and I just want to just make a couple comments, and some other people have sort of texted in kind of saying how much they appreciate this talk, actually, and some said they had to go at the end of the hour, and just that they wanted to thank you personally and how amazing it was, and I certainly agree with them, and I also agree with what Angus was saying, was you really covered a wide array of things here in this 1 hour period, so much credit to you and how you're able to make things deep and clear at the same time. And for those of you, I also want to kind of note a couple resources. Please do go to instituteofcoaching.org and explore Carol's Institute of Coaching. And again, the passcode is New Year, all one word. And I also want to kind of note, Carol was talking about the branding example. You can go to the VIA channel on YouTube, and indeed Carol is there speaking about branding with character strengths. And also Carol was generous enough to be interviewed by another person who freelances with VIA named Mary Judd, and Mary Judd interviewed Carol and sort of kind of sketched out Carol's articulation of several different key VIA practices, not only in the business world but also in the coaching world. So that is also on our site. It's actually on the slide that you see right in front of you right now. And finally, a final note of gratitude to you, Carol, and I just want to also say to you that you really have this in your presentation style, this amazing blend of head and heart. I mean, it sounds kind of trite, but it's very, very true. You're able to bring forth such intellectual depth in a concise way, in a meaningful way, but I'm really feeling such heart from you, such compassion and passion in the material. So both are just so clear and blended so nicely. So for that, I want to thank you very much.
So my top 3 strengths, by the way, are gratitude, love of learning, and capacity to love and be loved.
All right. That's the perfect blend for that description.
So it does match up, and it connects to peak performance.
That's right. Yes. Well,
if I was doing physics, this would not be so great.
But you found the right match for your work, so that's what's important here.
Yes.
Well,
Anyway, thank you so much. This has been great, and we'll do this again sometime.
Sounds great. Thanks, Carol. Thank you, everybody, for listening.